back, so
Yeah.
thank you, Anne, for allowing me to be here and to enter this space, this wisdom dialogue, a space informed by silence and sourced out of wisdom. Wisdom defined as love in action, with the idea of activating a new dialogue for humanity. And today's dialogue is very special because I'm in your presence. And also because today is a special edition of this Wisdom Dialogue. It's the Soul Wisdom Dialogue, reawakening humanity, reawakening the world. So we'll be seeing where the dialogue takes us. Deep down, the topic is how soul and spirit play together for the world to reawaken. The Wisdom Dialogue, as I said, is a special place and space that is informed by silence. So we'll let silence guide us to the source of the cosmos and let it speak to us and through us. So maybe we begin with a bit of silence. So let's create the space we need here. We can just be here and turn our gaze within. Be mindful of the connection of our feet to the ground, to earth, to Mother Earth. And as we attend to that connection, so we can fully breathe in and focus on our breath. I'm very grateful to be here and to be in silence with you. Silence for me is really a gift. There's surprises every time I allow it to be. It has a soothing quality. When I sense it, I could be there forever. And it's fascinating for me to realize that, because to some extent what we really need right now is that soothing quality to be with us. Somehow, our awakening of the world begins with that silence.
Yes, I think the silence is awaiting or making a space for revelation, because unless there is silence, nothing can come through. Silence gives space and an opening.
And when you speak this way, I'm immediately called to my heart. There's something that gets opened there and through my heart with silence. Feels like another dimension is accessible, pouring information and informing the space that comes and goes from the heart. And the silence also, to me, is associated with two things that both move in the space. And one is the sound of silence. There's a special frequency, there's a special noise that for me is detectable when I'm in silence, a radio frequency to tune into. And I wonder whether the heart has the code to synchronize the frequency and somehow be able to translate that frequency into a speakable sound or a sound that can be interpreted. And the other thing, the other movement is the breath that moves through me, in the silence, that carries me. And it immediately is associated with the notion of the soul. In many languages and traditions, soul and breath are somehow associated. And I recently also realized how much the soul is a movement that moves through me and that moves me to be and do in a certain way.
I think it moves all of us because it's really the breath of the cosmos that moves through everything and everyone. And that breath we breathe in as we wake up in the morning and we breathe out as we go to sleep at night. But it's really infusing everything in this room where we're sitting. It's coming to us from the cosmos. Every breath we take is actually putting us in touch with the cosmos if we only knew it. Evidently you do know it, which is very nice. But to feel the presence of that breath in the heart, if you give it space and an opening really, then it can come to life in a way, in a deeper way, I think. I feel St. Francis is very much with us and blessing us both. And saying, you'll have to try and do what I tried to do so many centuries ago.
Say a few more words.
Well, just that then the task was difficult. I was trying to change the church, which was a colossal undertaking. And you now are trying to change the consciousness of humanity. Your task is mighty, but you have the insight and the calm to actually to be able to follow the guidance and to bring it through into the world, which is in such need of guidance. So you must never despair, because you're given the strength to accomplish what is unfolding step by step
what comes as you speak about St. Francis is the simplicity of its message and the potency of its message, because it was so simple. So there's this word that keeps surfacing my awareness: integration, uniting rather than separating. Is this immense task I feel we are invited to embrace, of integrating things that seem to be at the opposite end.
Yeah, I think the primary separation, if you like, came from the belief that spirit and matter were different in kind. And I see the task of integration now as bringing matter within the sphere of spirit, knowing that it is essentially spirit, is made of spirit. We see it as something material because we can't see through to the quantum level. I think there are two primary integrations. One is that, the integration of matter and spirit. And the second one is the integration of the human psyche, bringing together matter and spirit within each human individual, knowing that they are divine beings, that they carry divinity within every cell of their body, because the body is sacred, just like the earth is sacred. So those are the two primary integrations, first of spirit and matter, or spirit and nature, and secondly to integrate body, soul, mind and spirit in the human being, so the human being becomes aware that he or she is far, far more than she or he had ever imagined or dreamed of, and to realize that we are within spirit every second of our lives, every breath we take, that spirit is breathing through us, and that we can receive this through our soul and through our mind and through our heart. Those are not really separate. Again, they've been separated, but they're really one functioning whole. If one could give a new vision to humanity of what we truly are, first of all, we're cosmic beings as well as earthly beings, and secondly, to give humanity an understanding of what why they're here on this planet. Why has our life evolved in the way it has over 13-point-something billion years, until the point of time when the universe has become conscious in us, which is such an exciting thing, that as we awaken to the presence of the universe or the cosmos within us and living through us, then we put ourselves in touch with where we've come from, with our origin, which is not far distant, but is continually being created every second, and every nanosecond. The universe is creating new life, new forms of life, new ideas, new connections, new relationships. And we just have to pay attention to where we're guided and who is guiding us, and realize it's the cosmos itself, wanting us to wake up, wanting us to be able to communicate with it.
I keep going back to integration of soul, mind, spirit, and on the one end, I could definitely see and breathe into these three things being one, and on the other, there's probably the need to shed some clarity around the relationship between soul, mind, and spirit. And the soul and spirit seem to be very connected and being the same thing, but in a different level of manifestation.
Not necessarily, because we've been given one idea about spirit and an idea about soul, but one is masculine or male, as we know, but we've completely neglected the feminine, God the Mother, the Holy Spirit, and they've been separated when they belong together, united. They're two faces of the same thing, like the Tao, the two aspects of the Tao, the male and the female aspect of reality. So soul is the container of spirit. It's the field within which spirit is active, and the energy is pouring through the fabric of soul, which is the container of the whole universe, really, with all the galaxies, everything else, and us included. One can separate them, but not make a distance between them, because they are in essence one.
Yeah.
And this is the teaching actually of Kabbalah, that the two divine aspects of the creative ground are one, but they have different ways of being active. One is the energy of spirit, which pours from the beginning in the great breath that created us 3.5 billion years ago, or 4 billion years ago, and is still creating us every second. And the other is the container, the matrix of being, which is necessary for spirit to function in, because one without the other couldn't function the way they do. They need the union of the two. And in the same way, in the human being, you need both the mind consciousness and the soul consciousness, which is mediated through the heart. The heart is the main opening, as it were, to the soul. And then, once you're in touch with the soul, then you can receive the spirit at the same time. And we receive only a tiny part of that consciousness in our mind and in our heart as well, and in our body. But it's so huge that the vehicle that we are can't assimilate the whole of it in 1 second. We can only assimilate the part that we're capable, that our mind enables us to assimilate. So the body must never be forgotten, because it's the temple in which all of this takes place. We can't incarnate on this planet without the body. So it's a very precious aspect of spirit, which has been neglected and derided and looked down on as something inferior. But in fact it is, as I say, the temple of the whole experience of consciousness as we know it, and as we could know it in a greater state of opening and understanding.
And so the body then being in service of the mind, that is in service of the soul, that is in service of partnering with the spirit.
Yes, if you turn the whole thing upside down, you can say that the spirit is serving the body at the same time.
Yeah, and I see a two-side movements, from the spirit to the body, from the body to the spirit. It's a dance.
Right. Yeah, it is, yeah.
There is a constant exchange. And in that kind sort of order, that there is spirit, soul, mind, and body. And body, then mind, soul, and spirit. It would be lovely if you could say a bit more around the relationship between the body and the mind.
Well, the body we come in as we're born as infants. We take our first breath as the body, coming from another dimension as the soul. And I remember Meister Eckhart said, the soul is not in the body is in the soul. But because we've been trained to think only through the mind, we've looked down, or we've neglected or banished the soul as if it never existed. And we've banished spirit as well. So there's a great work of reassembling these banished pieces, bringing them back together, so that they all function as a harmonious whole. And the heart has been completely neglected for thousands of years, really, except through the artist. And so we desperately need the true artist, that is the visionary artist, to reconnect us with something that we've forgotten and we've marginalized, because we've given mind the primary importance. And so now it's important to recalibrate or rebalance those aspects of ourselves so that they are working in harmony, but none is sort of superior or better than the other. The true teaching of the soul is to listen, as you said, to listen to the heart, to listen to the soul, to listen to the the true mind, to listen to the voice of the cosmos speaking through us in our creative abilities, in our ideas, in our longings, above all, in our longings for relationship with something greater than ourselves, and yet it includes ourselves, it doesn't exclude us. So this is very important now for people to understand, to reassemble the parts of themselves so that their parts are not split off and forgotten, but reincarnated, reintegrated into a harmonious whole. And look at the great artists, where the soul comes through. You can see that so clearly. You need to ask yourself when you look at them, is the soul coming through this painting or this sculpture? What is coming from the heart of the artist or the sculptor to bring into being its wonderful creation that celebrates life and celebrates the beauty of life and the wonder of life and the miracle of life. Somebody just told me that. I heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah. When my husband painted that marvellous painting on the wall, he didn't hesitate, he just did what his soul was telling him to paint. And it came through very quickly. And it's about, just we've been both saying, that spirit is breaking through the barrier that we've set up. It's not going to mess about anymore.
So is it somehow inviting our mind to expand and not constrain and not limit the expression of spirit and soul?
Not limited, just open it to the beingness of both.
And you know, the word body very much connected to the matter and to who we are. Body is a gift that we have because as human beings we have a gift of embodying our soul, or allowing our soul to be operating in this space and time through the body. When I think about the body, I immediately also taken to the image of a tree that stands tall with its roots in the ground but reaching for the sky, and so being in between the earth and the sky. Being between and being at the same time matter and spirit, and bridging those two worlds, let them speak. In this life and time and space, we have the luck of having a body to keep expressing soul and spirit, seeing the body as being the temple able to integrate those two huge dimensions.
Enabling us to live here.
Yeah.
I was thinking of another thing, that the soul survives the death of the body. And this is something that has been very difficult to understand. We have a very, very limited idea of who we are because we think our consciousness is just bounded with this life, whereas there are an infinity of lives, possibly, that we've had. So this also, we need to take away the barrier we've created, thinking that the end of the body is the end of consciousness and the end of life, as modern science has told us, which is completely wrong. So it's like taking away the scales from something that's been covered up for a very long time, peeling away the layers and layers and layers that have been built up. It's like an excavation, getting to what has been buried for so long, which was known to the Egyptians and known to even people before the Egyptians, but has completely been forgotten by the patriarchal religions and hasn't been taught. They haven't taught people that they are immortal. Imagine the change there would be if people knew they were immortal and their lives were not bounded to this one life on the planet. It would take away the fear of death, which is very much the driving force in people's lives, that they have to succeed because they've only got one life. They have to make a lot of money, or they have to have more of everything, because the vista of infinite lives has been taken away from them. So it isn't surprising that they fall into what's called consumerism, or the pursuit of material things, because they don't know anything else. Also, I wanted to say that we see ourselves as physical, as heavy beings, But in fact, when you go into the quantum vacuum, we're light. Everything is light. Both the physical body, everything around us, everything in the world is made up of these quanta of light, which is spirit. So if you connect this modern science with the old teaching of spirit being present, ever present, you can put the two together and understand the body as absolutely vibrating with energy. We don't see it as that. I see you solid sitting in front of me, but everything is vibrating like that because instantaneously, it's so quick that we see it as solid. That to me is one of the most fascinating things of the quantum discoveries, that anything can change at any moment into anything else.
Yeah.
It's not static.
Yeah,
and that again is very freeing, because possibility then opens up. We're not stuck in a framework.
Yeah, everything is energy, motion, and the full potential opportunities are all around. And I love what you said about the light. We are absolutely light.
And love too, because light and love are the two foundation. I've said in my book that light and love are the pulse of the universe. But it's such a strange thing to think that we are light and love, and that is where our impulse to love others, to love our children, to love animals, to love the trees and the flowers and everything in this earth, that impulse to love and to cherish comes to us from what we are and what the universe is, what the great moving force of the universe is, love. And a light that we see when we die, we see that light and we move into it. That is the light that is the light of the minute particles of matter.
Yeah, so that's what you're sharing here, and there are two things. One is this notion of love being probably the force we need to open to allow spirit to fully flow and do its work. The mind, we need to be with the mind in a different way. And so how can we open to be with the mind, but not let it limit us, not let it be everything? Because there are moments where, particularly when I'm in silence, my mind is not there, and I feel a full connection between my body being still and my soul breathing through my breath and being inspired by spirit. And so if one sees it that way, could be tempted to see that the mind somehow is getting in the way, hasn't got to be here. What's the role of the mind, and how can the mind be part of this dance that wants to happen?
The mind is essential for living in the world, for one thing, and it's become associated really with the ego, which is also necessary for living in the world. It's tied into survival instincts and at a deep level. What we have to watch out for with the mind is when it comes in as an inner critic. And the left hemisphere of the mind likes things to be very set, and it likes to feel safe within the knowledge that it has. It likes to feel it knows enough to negotiate life in the world, and it's very necessary. But if it takes over, it can become the critic, and it can say, well, this sounds like nonsense, there's no such thing as soul anyway. Science says there's no such thing as soul. Why do you think there's such a thing? So it can come in as a very powerful inner critic. One should not diminish its power. As I say, it likes to look at things in sequence, A, B, C, D, with an end at the end, so to speak, and a beginning here. But that is really the kind of mind that came into being when we developed the power to read about 2000 BC in Sumeria. And it's become a habit that we've got locked into, so that we think we always have to know the beginning and the end, whereas we don't. we just have to say to that part of the mind, just relax and take things easy, and just allow the imagination to come in, which is the right hemisphere, and moderate your need for certainty. Just be open to revelation and to discovery. This is how the great scientists have made their great discoveries, like Einstein, because he followed his imagination, and it led him to his famous equation and everything of matter being spirit. But it's just being aware of the different kinds of mind we have. The one which is we use mainly in our educational system, which is learning a lot of facts, producing them in an exam, which gives you the entry into the world of whatever you're going to do in the world, but mainly into politics, business, whatever. Whereas the imagination can lead one into a different way of living in the world, where it can use the left hemisphere. So it's a question of balancing and training, retraining the mind not to listen to the inner critic, not to ridicule, because this is what leads to so much severe depression in our culture, is that the right hemisphere is stifled and suffocated by the left because of the way we're educated. We're educated to give the full value to the left hemispheric skills and not to even know the existence of the right hemispheric ones. So the right hemisphere is connected with the heart. It's even the first to develop out of the heart when the embryo is in the womb. It develops before the left brain comes into existence. So it's the primary faculty we have, as it were, which needs to be honoured and related to, so that we get this better balance. And so we don't get destroyed by the inner critic, which is at the root of depression. And depression is fundamentally the soul trying to speak and being stifled. There's such severe depression now because people don't know how to live other than to live the way they've been taught. And so the soul falls into a deep, deep depression, but it doesn't want to live because this is not a life it wants to live in. The fundamental sickness of our society is depression. And the depression is coming because we don't know who we are, or why we're here, or that we have a soul, and that the soul needs to be heard in order for us to be healthy. I'm sure you know of Ian McGilchrist, who's written a mammoth book about all this, showing in the last 2,000 years how the soul has been marginalised and the right hemisphere has been shut down. And that's the reason that our culture is in such a mess, and why it's on the wrong path.
So you are back to the huge task that we have in our hands for the world to awaken. And we've spoken about it, speaks very clear to the personal, organizational and societal and spiritual crisis that very much determine.
Yes, so there's a spiritual awakening and an educational awakening, if you like. The two go together, but you can't separate the way we bring up our children from the kind of people they turn into because of the lack of true education, the lack of the heart being developed, feeling being developed, so that only the intellect is developed, the left hemisphere of the mind, and they're impoverished. People are impoverished in their soul and in their mind, really. So there's a big task to do, showing also the love aspect, connecting with the earth, realizing the damage that we've done to the earth through being on the wrong path, and trying to undo that damage in whatever way we can, mainly by the care that we give, to the earth, but all to the aspects of life on earth, the animals, and the way we bring up our children. That's all part of earth as well. So that's another aspect of activating the love to heal what we've destroyed, or to regenerate it.
Mm-hmm.
This is what regenerative agriculture is trying to do, which I think is a marvellous initiative that's taking place quite strongly in this country and in Europe, I think. I don't think it's growing so much in America, because America's dominated by the power principle and mastery of nature.
Mm.
Man is there to dominate nature.
Mm.
And that was a fatal, fatal error that we made not so long ago, but beginning in the 18th century. Or even actually beginning way, way, way back in the time of the early civilizations, when agriculture began to be developed, and we lost the reverence for a sacred earth long ago. It's not modern, it's long, long ago. And we turned to war instead, war and conquest, instead of relationship with the earth and relationship with the cosmos. That happened at the end of the Neolithic, really, the beginning of the Bronze Age, when we began to make stronger, more powerful weapons. And that led us on a trajectory of making ever more powerful weapons, until now we have nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
But you can follow the path of each development into the skill of weaponry. And as that developed, so we lost the sense of the sacredness of the earth, and that we were here to cherish the earth and care for it, not to dominate it.
Mm. Yeah, something that it's very clearly associated with love, and the ability intrinsic in love to again reunite and integrate rather than separate. So it's as if love itself has the power to reassemble all these pieces that have been disassembled.
Yeah.
Through our mind, so much idealized and maybe so much associated with the ego and the inner critic, and not allowing this partnership between the mind and the soul as the sacred marriage, again the integration.
Yeah.
And it's also very much connected with death, because the fear of death, which has been so much emphasized, also as a way to actually exercise and govern the people, is ultimately what leads to the quest for power, what leads to war, what leads to destruction.
Yes, I do see the fear of death as at the root of all
everything.
things. Yes.
And so there's something there among these two forces, as to speak. Fear, symbolized, epitomized with the fear of death, as one way of taking fear into our mind consciousness. And on the other side, there's love, in its multiple forms it takes, but ultimately the care we can bring into agriculture, the care we can bring into education, into educating our children, that care is driven out of love, and how love can manifest and really caress us and holds us along the way. So there seems to be these two contrasting forces, where one seems to be more real to the soul, is love, and the other one seems to be more real to the mind, which is death.
It's the construct it's put on reality and got stuck in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating because these are two. It's like one cannot see the other one, or cannot, as if we cannot hold the two together.
The two together. But I think once we look at what you've just said, that fear leads to dissociation, lack of relationship, enemies, war, and destruction, which has been the pattern of the last 4,000 years, and we haven't known how to get out of it. Whereas on the other hand, love has been also shown. When you think of the love of the billions and trillions of mothers who brought up their children during these thousands and thousands of years, nobody's paid any attention to the importance of that love, how it's shaped possibly, how it's even possibly saved humanity all the time through all these thousands of years. There's always been the destruction of war on the one hand, but the love of the mothers for their children and the care that they've given them while they were growing up, while the father may have been away fighting wars or whatever, but he wasn't so much present as the mother was. And it may be that the mother has given the values, the deep values, to humanity, which are the values of justice, truth, compassion, and love. Those values come from the care that the mothers gave their children and the children absorbed as they grew up and valued and made more conscious in things like human rights and the struggle for justice through centuries. So I think that's very important, because people forget the role of women in bringing up these children through thousands of generations. Because the woman does have the primary, first of all, she carries the child, then she gives birth to it, and then she has to care for it while it's young. The father has provided the, as it were, the background of security where he's able to, with the home and everything, up until the modern age when women now also earn money. But for thousands of years it was the father who provided the security and the mother who provided the primary form of love, although the father obviously loved the children as well. But sometimes duty got in the way of that love, and the children were brought up to say they have to behave in a certain way in order to belong to the wider community. The values of love might not have been able to show themselves in a very patriarchal society, like Iran today, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, or Afghanistan, you can take those two examples, where love simply doesn't count, and fear and power have taken over. COVID is an example of how left brain plus government can take control of a whole population and create what's called a mass psychosis in the population, which is coming from fear.
Yeah.
When love comes in, you have a different framework of reference from what fear gives us. And that's terribly important now, because I think we're moving into a phase where more fear will be constellated, quite deliberately, in order for governments to take more control. So we have to beware of this lack of balance in our culture, and where it can lead us. It can lead us into a trap of a sort of being imprisoned in rules that we have to obey because there's no way to get out of them. And that, as I see, is the great danger of this time, that there's a kind of totalitarian takeover coming from fear, using fear as a means of control. So what you've said is very important, that really we need to develop the other side, with the love side. We need to be aware that we are not basically made of fear, but we're made of love. And that the survival instincts which have programmed us to survive are based on fear and on the prevention of disaster. The survival instincts. They have to be told, no, it's okay. There is a different way, a different path you can go here. You don't have to go the path of blind fear.
So if there are these two sides, on the one side is fear and power, and the two things somehow living on each other's, and on the other side is love and light, or love and life. How can the two things be merged, in a sense that how can we become more aware of the power of love and somehow, or go beyond the fear of death?
I think we can only do that if we become aware of what we are, that we are not simply material beings, that die when the physical body dies, that we're far, far more. And this would activate the power of love and the ability of love to teach us a different way of living, I think, based on relationship.
Mm-hmm. So it's by, in essence, by breathing into our souls, we're invited to be love.
Yes.
And be a force of love and pouring love into the world. For the world to be seen as the matrix that you also mentioned too, as multi-layered,
yeah.
reality.
Multi-layered dimensions,
yeah.
yeah. There's so many times in a day when we could give a gesture of love and receive the love and be grateful, like I thanked her, you know, be grateful for it.
Yeah, so beautiful. If we were to pay more attention to that love opportunities and open to that, we would probably allow love to be us and to be through us, progressively help us calm down our mind and that fear.
Yes.
And that anxiety to control everything. Because everything that you want to control, somehow, it comes from the fear of not being loved.
Yeah.
Because you want to control, because you want to make sure there's love.
Mm.
By doing that, you limit love. And how could we open to love more? If love is the answer, if love is what allows us to be the light we are, and allow the light to shine even stronger and further and deeper.
I think we need to look at our relationships. All of us have relationships of some kind. All of us have come into the world through a mother and a father. Many of us have had children. Many of us have animals that we love. Just see the field that is available for love in our own individual lives and see where that love can become more conscious, so that love goes like an arrow to the destination, like an archer pulling back his bow and letting the arrow go, so that love can go to the target that we have around us. And we can go in our imagination. We can send love to the situation in Ukraine. That all is part of imagination, which has great power, which we don't know about because we haven't been taught. But even the thought of sending love to Putin, coming from thousands of people, could possibly change Putin's behavior and his lack of love, because that's at the root of his problem, in which he wants power to compensate for the lack of love in his life. So you can see all around the people who are acting from a lack of love. You can't heal the whole world with one thought, so to speak, but you can heal in small examples every day. The way you treat people, the way you address people, seeing them as divine beings instead of this boring old woman or man, whatever it might be, or this irritating person who's getting in my way with his car. Switch to the love alternative and see what happens when you come out of anger and fear into love, and how situations can change, how you may even be able to save lives that way. There are many, many mysteries that we don't know about. We don't know how thought works nearly enough, and how feeling works. All this is important in the small detail, because it's in the small detail that we make the mistakes, or that we find fear takes us over and love goes out the window. And you may feel angry with your sister or your brother because of some ridiculous thing that's come up between you. Make peace as much as you can in all those situations. If you're not able to make peace, just let it go. But be reconciled as much as possible where there's an animosity or anger, jealousy, envy, all those things that we've been taught to look out for. See what the root of them is, and see something in you that feels lacking, that the other person you feel might have, and that you would like to have, and so you attack them for what you haven't got. And that is actually example of soul loss, because people are so out of touch and unaware of their creative power that they want to destroy it in other people. It's coming from a deep sadness within people that they are nothing, that they're of no value, and therefore they have to destroy value in other people.
Yeah, and again it goes back to the absence of love, or the fear of not having love.
Mm. And
so
the fear of being of no value and of no worth.
Of not being seen, yeah.
Yeah. And that goes also to the disparity in society between the rich and the poor. The poor feel neglected and they feel they have nothing compared to the rich, and the rich want more or seem to have more, like Bill Gates, for instance, as an example. But the real healing of the poor would come if they realized that if they no longer identified with their situation, miracles might happen.
Mm-hmm.
This is something very difficult to explain, but they could change their attitude to who they think they are to become these divine beings which are capable of getting out of their situation and getting help from the universe. They're not aware that they can ask for help and that help will come.
And it also very much associated with this contraposition between scarcity and abundance.
Mm.
Whether you believe that love is scarce, and so you need to
hold on to
hold
it.
on, yeah, or whether it's abundant, so it's everywhere, it's just a matter of open to it.
Mm.
But I wonder whether life is all about a journey into love somehow.
It is. That's what the whole thing is about. That's why we're on this planet, to learn to love and to be in love rather than in fear. One can understand where the fear comes from because we've had a difficult thing of survival for thousands of years. And this is very strong now, and we're confronted with nuclear weapons which are the ultimate creation of our fear. So if we're destroyed by nuclear weapons, it's because we've been destroyed by our fear that's gone into creating these weapons. And the genius of our race has been put to dark practices or evil ends, which will bring evil upon us, because that's the way things work. You can't create those sort of weapons without having things activating a momentum which could easily lead to our destruction, either deliberately or inadvertently through somebody setting them off by mistake. So we're in a vicious circle of fear, power, greed, weapons, destruction. That's the circle, so to speak. Whereas if we got into your circle of love, abundance, helping each other, working together rather than against each other, in the sense of the great nations working together to help the earth, the situation would change in a moment. I mean, it would be like a bolt of lightning which would strike the earth and awaken it up and show that we can live in a different way. But we have a lot to break through because that huge shadow aspect of the creation of fear, and it's there like a great sort of ball of iron, if you like, and which is very difficult to dissolve because it's a habit of thousands of years we are indoctrinated into when we come into life through our educational system and through our political values.
Yeah, and so we are back to the construct of our mind that creates that huge ball you're speaking of. At the same time, our soul and heart that has the capacity to hold everything and see beyond it. So how can we be open and more listening to the force of the cosmos, the spirit that is trying to talk to us, that is trying to invite us into a shift.
So your question is really, how do we learn to listen to the spirit of the depths? And this is just a question of knowing that we have to listen to the voice, and then of making the time and the silence to listen in our own lives, and then following it, because all that big ball of iron that I spoke about is the shadow that the instincts have created unwittingly, not knowing what was happening. But it can be dissolved if we pay attention to what has happened, which is why my work is so much to do with looking at the past and seeing where we went wrong. But we could change all this, and it is changing in many, many people's lives. There are many teachers in the world, like yourself, like me, who are in their own individual way trying to shift the balance from fear to love. It's because, as my friend Andrew Harvey says, you have to become a sacred activist. You can't just sit and contemplate. You have to get out there and live in the world and bring your vision into the world, just like the saints did in the past. Look at what St. Francis did in his short life, but he was trying to shift the whole understanding of what Christ's teaching was. And we have to bring a different vision. And there's that old saying that without vision the people perish. The people have been perishing, but they don't need to perish any longer.
Mm. Yeah, and there's these two words that keep surfacing, quantity and quality. There's definitely a need to reach a certain level of people be able of shifting the mind consciousness. At the same time, there's something around quality that can happen in an instant. So, what is the shift in quality, in the quality of our relationship, in the quality of our living, in the quality of our awareness, in the quality of our beingness, that needs to evolve and shift so that we can allow the transformation to happen?
Well, I think it's like a snowball that gathers momentum as it goes downhill.
Mm.
That you don't need to push the numbers, however many million already exist. There are quite a few million. You don't have to up the numbers, as you say, but we just have to somehow initiate this change in understanding, and the thing could change in a moment, and like, as I said, like a flash of lightning, which would illuminate things which had been hidden before, not understood before. If people knew that they were part of the cosmos, that they weren't separate from the earth, that they were part of the life of the earth, and that the cosmos is alive in them and in their lives, wanting to grow greater, to expand, to love more, if you like, to what's the word? To expand, to enlarge. One needs a largeness of vision, which I think, at the moment we have a very small window of vision, much too limited. People don't know who they are or why they're here. If they knew who they were and why they are here, that could change the lives of millions. It doesn't have to be a matter of belief anymore. It's a matter of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Changing the image of who you are and what you feel yourself to be. It's not other people telling you what you have to believe anymore. That's the old way. It's not governments telling you what you have to do. That's also the old way. It's discovering what the universe wants you to do at any particular moment, and listening to that voice of the depths, as Jung said.
Mm.
And that's the treasure. If we can change our understanding of life, which is what life wants us to do at the moment, I think life is begging us to do, then many miracles could happen. And that is a voice coming from up above. Many miracles could happen. Well, I think the miracles is important to remember that miracles did happen in the saints.
Maybe one final word is that something I keep opening to and towards is the idea that we need to shift from thinking to sensing more and more as a capacity to go beyond the mind or include the mind, but be open to receiving information in a different way, and trust that information and that love that comes with information to guide us in the next steps.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And sensing includes the sentience. We are sentient beings, and we can have sentience at the level of the mind or the level of the senses and the body, intuition, feeling. All these are aspects of sentience, I think, which we haven't really made fully conscious. We can use many more faculties that we may not even know that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think senses is developing the senses in every sense is vital. So joy is an aspect of sensing which is terribly important.
Yeah. And for me, where's joy, there is the soul.
Exactly. You're absolutely right.
Sensing allows us also to give sense to things and to make sense of our nature and life. And when now as we speak about sensing, I'm also reminded that as Homo sapiens, there's something connected with being able to embrace wisdom, sapientia, and to be able cultivating that as a way to shift.
Yes, well, I think what we've been talking about is about wisdom, and wisdom is what's missing everywhere. So the more we can become conscious of what wisdom is and bring it back into our lives, and it is, as you said, it's the capacity to sit in silence, listen to the voice of the depths, question perhaps what we're doing or what's being done around us, and trust that inner voice, and perhaps wisdom will come back into our world then, because it's certainly missing now.